The oldest adage in the gun business is buy the gun, not the story. I think that holds true for the most part, with the exception of these two Thompson submachine guns, because in both cases, I think the story is much more interesting than the gun. Not that they're uninteresting, because these are both examples of the Model 1928 Thompson submachine gun, specifically the 28A1 derivative. And both of these have a story beyond what you see here that's worth telling, particularly this one. Now, this is a Savage World War II production M1928A1. The interesting detail about this is that at some point during its history, it made its way to Indochina, probably because it was arming French troops that were there. A large number of Thompsons were given to the French military by the Americans. And so this one probably made its way to Indochina in the early 1950s, and it stayed there afterward, we know that, up until war began again in 1965. In late 1966, a young American named Alan J. Fry completed Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, and was an ROTC commissioned in the United States Army. Fry then went off to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for officer basic training. Upon completing that, he volunteered for flight school, went to Fort Rucker in Alabama. He trained there, learning rotary wing aviation, at which time he became a warrant officer and then was assigned to an assault helicopter company. This was in 1967, so you guessed it, he went directly to Vietnam. Once he reached the Republic of Vietnam, he gets there and begins flying missions immediately prior to the beginning of '68. During that time, he was flying around a regiment of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, ARVN, or South Vietnamese Forces. During that time, he was flying an ARVN regimental commander from here to there on a regular basis, and continued to do so until the Tet Offensive in 1968. In the aftermath of the Tet Offensive, this ARVN regiment was issued new American M2 carbines. Prior to that, these 120 and 130-pound South Vietnamese soldiers were carrying M1 rifles, they were carrying Thompson submachine guns, and they were carrying Browning automatic rifles. In the aftermath of Tet, when they were given the M2 carbine, the old World War II weapons went into storage, but the man commanding this ARVN regiment, as a gesture of goodwill, as a gesture of appreciation to Alan J. Fry, who had been his pilot during Tet, he offered him this Thompson submachine gun. And Lieutenant Fry gladly accepted it and flew missions with this weapon. He had carried the M16A1 into the cockpit of his Huey prior to that, and he found that it was a little bit too long and a little bit cumbersome inside the cockpit. So when he had the opportunity to carry this weapon, he gladly took that opportunity. But then, as it got toward the end of calendar year 1968, he made a critical decision, which is the only reason that this weapon's with us today. And the decision was to mail it home to his brother. When he mailed the Thompson home to his brother, he told him, like, hey, I think you have to do something at the sheriff's office to make this legal. This Thompson was not issued to Lieutenant Fry, so it wasn't carried in a U.S. Army inventory of any kind. So when he decided to ship it home, there was nobody there to stop him. And there was no inventory list and no supply sergeant to turn him in for this. So he sends it home to his brother. His brother goes down to the post office and gets a Department of the Treasury form, fills it out, and turns it in. Because this was during the amnesty of 1968. And it was that amnesty that allowed for previously unregistered select fire weapons to become registered. So this is an amnesty-registered Vietnam bringback M1928 Thompson submachine gun that was carried by an ARVN officer during the Tet Offensive, and for that matter, even during the years prior to that. This Thompson was probably also used in Indochina fighting the Viet Minh, which is what brought it to Southeast Asia to begin with. So yeah, this is an interesting example of the Savage M1928A1 Thompson submachine gun, but it has one heck of a story associated with it. It causes me to backtrack on this issue of buy the gun, not the story, because in this case, the story's pretty incredible. This Thompson has a great story too. I was around for a lot of the creation of this Thompson because we bought a collection last year of an old machine gun dealer who was from Metairie, Louisiana, and he had this receiver. Now, this receiver is a West Hurley 28A1 receiver. If you know anything about the history of the Thompson submachine gun, you know that the Auto-Ordnance Corporation that created this Thompson is a little bit different than the Auto-Ordnance that created this one. This Thompson is created as a result of the Savage subcontract during World War II. This receiver probably dates to 1975 or so. We got the receiver by itself when we bought this collection last year. This was just a stripped, registered, transferable receiver. It's a machine gun, it just didn't have all the other parts on it that would allow it to fire. So we bought a parts kit, sight unseen off the internet. It turns out it's a very nice M1928A1 parts kit, but when we cut the box open and we looked inside, we found this little data plate on the buttstock, indicating that this was a Thompson submachine gun that had once been issued to the police force of the Tennessee Valley Authority, an agency that was created during the Great Depression by the Works Progress Administration during our country's attempt to wiggle its way out of the Great Depression. That agency oversaw the construction of roads, bridges, and dams. It sought to distribute electricity to rural parts of the Tennessee Valley, and it had a police force, and that police force at one point was armed with the Thompson submachine gun. Although this receiver didn't exist until the 1970s, it's now part of a Thompson submachine gun that at one point in its history was issued to the police force of the Tennessee Valley Authority. And that's an interesting story in and of itself. So if you ever had an interest in a Thompson, come have a look at these two. Either one of them would make great shooters.